We begin tonight with an update on the rescue efforts on Mount Hood.
And it's certainly sobering, not the news we wanted to start with tonight. We just learned one person has died. Another is hurt after they fell while climbing on the mountain Sunday evening. The climbers fell about 200 feet from the Luthold Couloir. That's a long, steep chute on the west side of the mountain. One of the climbers was able to call for help. Sky 8 over the scene earlier this evening. Rescuers started their search last night, but because of treacherous wind and snow conditions, they could not reach the climbers and had to turn back. Several teams went back today, 32 rescuers in all. The focus on reaching that injured climber who was hauled by a stretcher using ropes and then taken in a snowcat to timberline. The climber in critical condition. Rescuers say they'll have to leave the second climber's body on the mountain in the elements until conditions improve there.
Those rescue crews are amazing, but certainly not the news we wanted to hear. Let's bring in Matt Zaffino to talk about the weather these crews were facing. Matt.
Yeah, it was really windy up there today, and I'm going to show you some wind gusts at the 7,000 foot level in just a bit. But look at the mountain. You can see the snow blowing all over the place here. This is the Palmer chairlift. That is Philcox Hut, and this is the snowcat. And judging by what Clackamas County Sheriff's told us, that's probably the snowcat that brought down the injured climber. And you can see some headlamps here from the climbers descending from Illumination Saddle, where they staged that rescue and had to bring that litter, that sled, up and over to get it back on over. They tried to do a helicopter rescue, couldn't do it. The winds were too strong. And the rescue teams are amazing because they had teams staged on Illumination Saddle trying to cross the Reed Glacier to get to them. They also had another team go up in Summit and then try to come down from the summit. You can't see it in this image, but the West Side Ridge, which is where the top of that Luthold Couloir dumps out, but they couldn't drop back down into the couloir to reach the injured party there. So a valiant effort indeed. Here are the winds just today. And remember, this started yesterday, but they really came up today, sustained between 25 and 35 miles an hour. Gusts pretty much all morning into the afternoon, over 50 to 54 miles an hour. So really rough conditions up there, and a lot of wind loading of the snow that helped create the avalanche conditions that they were facing. And they were trying to climb that couloir. They were sinking in thigh deep, according to Clackamas County. So really difficult conditions, guys. Back to you.
You know, incredible work by the 32 members of those rescue teams. Thanks a lot, Matt. Appreciate that. Let's get to some other news just into us tonight. We have learned that 2 Portland teenagers have died in the last 2 days of suspected fentanyl overdoses. Have a look at these pills. They're commonly called M30s. You see the stamps. Police say each of the high school age teens had similar pills on them when they were found dead. Now, it only takes a tiny bit to be deadly. Investigators say they're trying to figure out where they came from and essentially putting this information out to try to prevent more overdoses. Portland Public Schools also confirming tonight these were students in their community. Now, black market fentanyl pills have become a huge problem in the state. Just last week, we reported how federal officers made the biggest fentanyl bust in Oregon history.
It is time for the new normal, with some big changes coming after 2 years in this pandemic. We're talking about whether or not to mask indoors, though for some, the stakes are much higher, with some financial help about to dry up. Alma McCarty joins us in the newsroom, and Alma, Oregon has just announced it's ending its rental assistance program.
Well, Laurel, you've only got 1 week left to sign up for emergency rental assistance. Keep in mind, if you've already submitted an application, this closure won't impact you immediately, and you are protected from eviction until you hear back. Everyone else, that deadline is looming.
Emergency rental assistance through Oregon Housing and Community Services has been a lifeline, a source of stability for many families during the pandemic. The agency paying out hundreds of millions of federal dollars to tens of thousands of households.
OHCS has responded with historic speed to provide rental assistance to more than 40,000 households. And what that means is we've supported an estimated 104,600 people in those households that we've served.
But this aid comes to an end next week. The portal for rental assistance closes to new applicants on March 14th at 11:59 p.m. Jill Smith, interim director of housing stabilization at OHCS, urged anyone who hasn't applied in the past and has fallen behind on rent to apply sooner rather than later.
I'm sure you're wondering why, with so much need, are we closing this portal? I want to assure you that we know the need is great and we want to help everyone, every household in need. And unfortunately, that simply isn't possible due to limited funding.
Back in December, the state paused new applications due to dwindling federal funds, but opened the portal back up at the end of January after state lawmakers allocated $100 million to support renters facing eviction. The housing agency also redirected nearly $13 million of its budget to support an additional 1,900 households. However, after being open for longer than initially expected, the portal will close, likely for good.
We will soon have completely committed or paid out all available funding, including new funding. We don't intend at this time to reopen the portal, but if there was the opportunity to do so, we would certainly consider that.
The agency says the applications will be approved for payment or denied based upon the highest need, not first come, first serve. According to an online dashboard for the rental assistance program, 18,000 applications remain to be processed.
Staying across the fine print, Alma McCarty there in the newsroom. Thanks, Alma. Well, starting Saturday in Oregon, it's going to be up to individual businesses whether or not to require masks indoors. We went and checked in with some store owners today. Some say they're really excited about the mandate being lifted because they don't like having to constantly remind customers to wear one. Others are more nervous. At Patala Imports on Hawthorne Street, the owner says he's going to extend things with his own rule just a touch longer.
I'm thinking I will do one more week because I'm myself, little bit age. I'm 70-year-old, So it's easy to infect, you know that, right? So I will do one more week and then.
Of course, the impact's also more severe for seniors, so a bit like a dimmer switch for him, not really an on or off. Lots of folks up in the air about this, both for employees and customers. Masks will still be mandatory, by the way, in certain spots, both in Oregon and Washington, healthcare settings, airports, and on public transportation. And here is why we are opening up this chart. This is how far daily COVID cases have fallen since the Omicron peak there in January. Over the past week, Oregon has seen an average of 530 new cases a day. That is a low we haven't hit since last summer.
Deciding whether you need to get tested for COVID may be more difficult as we move into spring. We found out seasonal allergies are ahead of schedule this year, and that has some people worried about mistaking hay fever for COVID symptoms. Catherine Cook talked with a doctor about telling the difference.
Feeling that tickle in your nose? You're not alone. Allergies, doctors say, are back. For some, like Heather Friesen's family, the onset felt earlier than normal.
Yes, usually in April, but my 8-year-old son is having issues already. His eyes were bothering him, itchy eyes yesterday. So
it could absolutely be allergies.
Dr. Shyam Joshi is medical director of allergy and immunology at OHSU. He says tree pollen season started about a month early, due in part to dry, sunny stretches in December and January.
Then we had several weeks of heavy rain. And so for the last few days, we've actually seen a lot more sunshine again. So the pollen count has significantly increased over the past week.
That's likely a big relief to a lot of people who are concerned about COVID.
We get that question quite frequently, are these symptoms allergies or are they COVID? And sometimes it's hard to tell, but generally if we're seeing a lot more itchiness, itchy watery eyes, sneezing, itchy nose, we're thinking most likely this is going to be allergies.
Besides over-the-counter meds, doctors say you can do a few other things to minimize pollen exposure. Keep your windows closed. Try a sinus rinse. Change your clothes when you come inside from outdoor activity. And you can even wear a mask.
And I have several patients that choose to wear masks even when there's nobody around because they do notice that their allergy symptoms are getting better.
When in doubt, Dr. Joshi says it's a reasonable precaution to take a COVID test. Just know that various allergens will be cycling through between now and September, including some of the highest pollen counts for grass in the world. But for folks who are new to town, there is some good news.
One very common allergen that we see in most of the U.S. is ragweed, and we actually have no ragweed here.
It's all about the small victories. Catherine Cook, KGW News.
Well, turning to the crisis in Ukraine, which is growing more dire by the day, Russian forces have now surrounded key cities and again are stepping up attacks. So the Pentagon says the Russian military is increasingly relying on long-range bombardment of cities. Multiple attempts at safe passage routes, humanitarian corridors to evacuate civilians have essentially failed. At the same time, the president and European allies are weighing their harshest response yet, a ban on Russian oil. Now, a bipartisan group of lawmakers today drafted legislation to get it done, and fast.
Let's not wait. Let's not dither. The shells are flying tonight, raining upon the cities of Ukraine.
And while it would deal a severe blow to the Russian economy, cutting off oil risks more pain at the pump here at home. Of course, gas prices across the country already jumped nearly 50 cents in the past week alone. In the metro area, meanwhile, they've hit record highs. Some stations downtown selling gas for more than $5 a gallon. The average cost per gallon across Washington right now, Oregon, I should say, sitting at $4.50. North of the Columbia in Washington, not much better, $4.45. Experts predicting the all-time national record could also fall sometime this week.
Oregon State researchers are working to harness a different source of energy. They got a big funding boost today from the federal government. $25 million will help the researchers test wave energy technology. They'll be doing it 7 miles off the coast of Newport in a first-of-its-kind facility called PacWave South. It's expected to be operational next year. PacWave's chief scientist and OSU professor said the Department of Energy committing to this new funding is a really big deal. It's a step toward harnessing energy that's always available that will help reduce the acceleration of climate change.
And so we like to think of this as like, you know, the low interest but guaranteed part of your retirement portfolio. We need to be proactive. We need to be problem solvers. We can't describe the problem anymore. We have to work on solving.
The project involves a lot of big groups, including other West Coast universities and power companies.